Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? What's up, Bad Vibes? Good to see you. How's everybody doing tonight? Everybody doing good? Everybody all right? Johnny, guess I'll start off by saying the normal spiel. What's up, Paranormal Stephanie? Thanks for coming. Yep, everybody, please hit the like button and share and subscribe if you're not. Um, I want to shoot the shit for a second before we really get going. Yep, everybody, check out each other's channel. If there's anyone new here that's not subbed to anyone else you see here, check them out, give them a look, and sub them. The Horror Hive is a whole bunch of people that do all kinds of stuff. They do like mask reviews. Sometimes they'll do video games, like horror games, narrators, all kinds of stuff going on at the Horror Hive. So check them out. They're pretty cool. Nihongo Johnny, he has a really cool channel. Bad Vibes Storytelling. Don't you dare hit that dislike button. It's well, just refresh. If it freezes, just refresh, Johnny. Is it froze? Let me look on mine. It's not froze on mine. So I don't know. All right. Well, I have one story that was submitted to me that was sent to me by Sinatra, and I don't see him here yet. So I will wait to read that one. Oh, and of course I have to do.
Stay a while and listen.
I gotta do that. All because of Johnny. So let me pull up. yeah. Ever since then, Johnny, I gotta do it like every time. Let me pull up the creepy pastas here, and I'll start off with just a normal creepy pasta. I think I've done almost all of them from. Who cares? All right. So let me get situated. Yeah, you like that? Yeah, that looks pretty cool. I got some other stuff coming. So next week, it should be all set up properly. Hey, Haley. Glad you can make it. I missed you. All right, so I'm going to start off reading this story, I suppose. It is called Cerberus, written by someone named Snake Tongue. The unrelenting dirt road twisted and turned in front of James. Small rocks popped under the tires, and a cloud of dust billowed behind him as he drove on through the forest. He was visiting his brother over a long weekend of 3 days. A trickle of sweat fell over his brow and onto the rims of his glasses. He was a city person. He had never been in the country for a day in his life, and although the hot Italian sun and rough terrain was bothersome, he found a sort of peace in it and was unique and irreplaceable. He remembered the words of the leering old man that had sauntered out of his old barn. His crumpled lips bulging with tobacco. James had asked the man, "Say, sir, do you know how to get to Ridge End?" That was where Wayne had gotten his new log cabin, and one he would only use for vacations. The man had smiled, as if he was glad to see someone at his barn after years of loneliness, even if they weren't trespassing. and said through stained teeth, "Of course, good sir. In about a half a mile there will be a fork in the road. Just take the path to the left and continue up until the road starts to turn. Then you'll take another left and you'll be there in no time." James had smiled in obvious relief and thanked the man graciously. The man had offered him some gas for his car, to which James had politely declined. However, the man insisted and turned back to his farm to get his fuel. He had returned with a small can of gasoline, which he had poured into the tank of the car, smiling all the time. The glitch is back? It's glitching again? Jeez. James remembered the man. James remembered the man with comfort, glad that there were people out there in these rural areas who were always willing to help. He was starting to feel drowsy. The hot Italian sun could definitely do that to a person. He nearly tipped his head and nodded off when he saw something up ahead. The fork in the road. He smiled with excitement, and his heart began to pound fast. Finally, after 3 months, he would see his fellow brother. He took the left path and continued to drive up the road. He noticed that the dirt road was growing much narrower than it had been before, as if it were recently constructed. It was becoming more and more difficult to keep his Honda on the path. The road played a trick on him, and it began to grow in elevation, just like the chain lift to a roller coaster. James was not awfully surprised by this. He was, after all, in the mountains. James glanced down nervously as he grew higher off the ground. The trees around him grew shorter, and the hills loomed around him like a set of walls ready to close in. The hills have eyes, James thought to himself with a grim smile. Then, just as suddenly as the road had started ramping upwards, it leveled out, becoming flat once more. The road was very unpredictable and almost certainly dangerous. James started to slow his car down bit by bit. The last thing he needed was to crash at a time like this. The road remained elevated but even. He continued to drive slowly and carefully until he heard an awful retching sound come from the back of his car, and then the engine died. He had run out of gas. He swore explosively at himself before getting out of his car and slamming the door shut. "How the hell did I run out?" he thought angrily to himself. "I got 14 gallons of gas at the station a few miles ago, and that man just gave me some extra." And then the smell hit him. It was like rotten eggs mixed in with some other foul, unrecognizable stench. It was coming from the gas tank. A wave of anger crashed down over James. "That son of a bitch! He filled my car up with something bad." James scowled ferociously, literally trembling with rage. He had no other choice. He would be forced to walk all the way to Wayne's cabin. "Hey, April, Mandy, thanks for coming." He began his trek up the winding dirt road. His handmade loafers scratched against the rough ground. He had no water and no food. It was only about a half a mile later when James began to realize the seriousness of his situation. He was hot, thirsty, and very tired. He normally took walks all the time in the cool mornings in the city streets, but here it was different, and it was dangerous. Another half hour passed, and still the road did not end. There was no sign of the left turn the man had told him about. Sweat began to pour down his face, and James found himself beginning to suffer from dehydration. He was no longer angry at the man for destroying his car. He just wanted to get to hell. He just wanted to get out of okay. He just wanted to get out of the hell his world had become. His vision blurred as his precipitation began to seep into his eyes. He lifted his head from the ground and wiped his face with one hand. He blinked with surprise. Right ahead of him, there was a log cabin and there was a truck parked beside it. James smiled, and his heart was filled with relief and gratitude from whatever God had saved him. Excuse me. He half ran, half stumbled up onto the porch and knocked impatiently on the door. He was answered almost immediately. The man before him was large and intimidating, with a plain white shirt through which his muscles bulged. For a moment, James was frightened at that the man would send him packing. But this did not happen. Instead, the man smiled, one of the warmest smiles James had ever seen, and said, "Oh, sail, sir. How can I help you? Can I interest you in some water or sweet tea?" He nodded his head vigorously as the man said, "Come on in. You look pretty thirsty." James remembered that the man didn't know who he was. My name is James Elry. I'm really very sorry to bother you, but my car broke down about a mile ago. The man took all of this in stride, as if he were used to hearing this story. "My name's Leroy Durant. A man down the road wouldn't have happened to sell you some gas, would he?" James was surprised, and he immediately replied that someone had. Leroy scowled angrily before opening his fridge and pulled out a pitcher. "Yeah, James, we got a lot of people who come to our little cabin because of him. Damned idiots keep experimenting with fuel, trying to find a substitute for oil." James was intrigued as Leroy handed him a glass full to the brim with ice and sweet tea. He took a large swig before responding, not even bothering with the straw. The tea tasted a little strange, as if someone had added a bit of lemon to it, but he paid this no mind and asked Leroy, "Has he ever gotten into trouble with the police?" Leroy laughed heartily. "What police are you talking about? Around here, the police is a man with the biggest gun in his hands." Still chuckling, Leroy replaced the jug in the fridge as James asked, Have you any family?" Leroy nodded his hand. Nodded his hand. Leroy nodded his hand and said in an undertone, "Yeah, I do. Would you like to meet them?" James glanced around. From what he could see, the cabin was completely empty, except for him and Leroy. He thought of an urban legend his father had once told him about a man who invited people to stay in his house before killing them overnight. James took another large gulp of his tea to spare him from having to answer Leroy's question. Suddenly, this place didn't feel quite as welcome as it did a few minutes ago. "Do you know how to get to Ridge End?" he asked evasively. He had come to find his brother, and he would see his brother. "Why, Mr. Elroy?" Leroy said, his visage curving into a wide smile. "You are you already are in Ridge End." At that precise moment, James felt his lips grow numb before he passed out. "Hey, look, I think he's waking up," hissed a female voice. "Shut up, Margaret," replied someone else, also female. Oh. James woke up to these nagging voices. He was cold and completely naked, with the exception of the manacles that bound his arms and legs. There was a bubbly giggle, and he felt a sharp nail dig into his stomach. He recoiled as much as the chains would allow and tried to say something through the rag stuffed in his mouth. His blurry eyes refused to open. What happened to me? He wondered. Then it all came back. The man at the barn, his car, and Leroy. "Hey, what's up, Sinatra?" His heart, which was previously keeping up a sluggish thud in his chest, was now pounding ferociously, or furiously, as if trying to be freed. He had a headache for some reason, probably the after effect of the drug that Leroy had gave him. Tears of terror seeped out through his shut eyes. Something sticky and slug-like dragged itself across his face. He strained against his chains madly as the two girls in the room continued to talk. "Elizabeth, that's disgusting. Don't lick his tears." James was on the verge of being sick into the cloth in his mouth. "Sorry, I just wanted to know what they would taste like. I've seen a lot of tears, but never tried tasting them." There was a momentary pause, and the second girl asked shamefully but curiously, "Well, what do they taste like?" The other girl laughed and then answered, "Like salt water." James opened his eyes and immediately shut them again. He wasn't ready to see his surroundings quite yet, but one of the girls had seen him do it. "Oh, look, did you see that? He opened his eyes for a second. Come on, we can convince him. Come on, we can convince him to look at us if we try." Both of the girls adopted sickly, sweet tones, as if trying to teach a dog a trick, but James refused to open his eyes. He wouldn't let himself be parted with his dignity. Then a cold hand touched his face, caressing his cheek. He drew back once more, only to have the hand follow him. He was too weak to fight back, and a thumb and a forefinger forced open one of his eyes. Standing before him were two beautiful young girls. They were both garbed in white robes that hung down to their bare ankles. They both appeared to be around 17 years old. One was an albino, her eyes pink and hair colorless, and the other, the one forcing open his eye, was a blonde with ice blue eyes. They were smiling at him with pristine white teeth, as a child smiles as she plays with her food before she eats it. He appeared to be in some sort of cellar. The floor was cold, and he was lying on the ground of straw, his legs not yet strong enough to move. There was a sudden cry from above, and both girls jumped. "Margaret! Elizabeth, are you playing with the new meat?" They exchanged hurried glances before quickly scurrying out of the room. Shortly after that, James blacked out. James awoke once more to the sound of repeated chanting. His mouth was still gagged, and he was not wearing any clothing. This time there was rope binding him instead of chains. He opened his eyes to see a massed congregation of people, all dressed in the ceremonial white robes that he had seen Elizabeth and Margaret wearing. They were all outside in the middle of the woods. It was nighttime. Torchlight illuminated the faces of many of the people. They were young and old. They all had their eyes shut and were swaying, chanting the same words over and over again in some unknown language. James became suddenly aware of the burning on his back. There was a fire somewhere behind him. James was suddenly grabbed roughly from behind, and someone turned him around so that he was facing the direction of the fire. James could not move his arms or his legs. They must give him some sort of drug. He saw that it was Leroy Darrett himself who had grabbed him, and who was now climbing the steps of what looked like a podium behind the roaring bonfire. Upon that podium, James' brother Wayne was tied up and held upright by a wooden pole, in which he was bound to. Leroy appeared to be sprinkling something upon the head of James's brother. After he was done with that, he descended from the podium and held up his hands. Immediately thereafter, the chanting stopped, and the people in the crowd opened their eyes. James recognized one of them as the man who had given him the false gasoline. Two others were Margaret and Elizabeth. It was then when Leroy opened his mouth and began to speak. "Brothers and sisters of my own kin, welcome to the night of the flesh." This was met with a great cheer from everyone in the crowd. "Tonight is the night," Leroy continued, "that the flesh will be returned to Lord Pluto." There was another cheer from the crowd. "And for now, the ritual to be complete, we will bring about Cerberus." This time, the crowd did not cheer, and instead began to chant again. James could only stare helplessly as Leroy jumped onto the podium and pulled out a slim silver knife from within the folds of his robes and cut the throat of his brother. Crimson blood sheeted out of a thin cut in Wayne's neck. Leroy used a chalice to gather up some of it. That's where it says gather up twice. To gather up some of it as it streamed down Wayne's throat and onto his bare chest. Leroy abandoned the podium and then came back towards James. He dipped one of his fingers in the chalice before withdrawing it and painting a symbol on the James's cheek in blood, a sort of a P that descended into an L. James remembered from school what this was. It was the symbol of the Roman god of death, Pluto. Was this how he was going to die? Sacrificed to a false god by an inbred cult? He felt a noise rumble up from the back of his throat and then intensify. It was laughter. Leroy turned around before flinging the rest of the contents of the chalice onto the flames of fire. A huge black dog jumped from the depths of the flames as three enormous heads snapped and growling. James was still laughing when the dog mauled him. Well, there's that story. It's all right, Sinatra. I was waiting to read that story you gave me. Wasn't it you that gave me that story? The young man? Was that you or was that CR? I can't remember. I sounded like a pirate. Arr, matey, I sound like a pirate if I want to. Thank you for liking and sharing, Jack. If everybody else could be like Jack and also like and share, that'd be glorious. My evening is going well. Thank you, April. How is your evening going? Do I like Swamp Dweller? Yeah, I ain't got a problem with Swamp Dweller. I used to listen to him a lot, but now I don't really listen to a whole lot. I'll go into his live streams, hang out for a second every once in a while, say what's up and stuff like that. Listen to his stories every once in a while, but usually I'm just editing audio and talking to my peeps on Discord. Yeah, that was a pretty creepy story. This story is called The Young Man. It is, oh, I think it was CR that gave me this story. It's an SCP Foundation story, but I'll read it. Yeah, Jack's awesome. Well, that's good that you didn't argue it all tonight. All right, so the young man. Nobody could like Corporal Lawrence. It's not to say nobody tried or that he was somehow unfriendly. Merely he was one of those few that seemed to be wired differently. However, in the trenches of World War I, normalcy was at best a relative term, and one that had minimal relation of life. Such as it was, Lawrence fought, listened to orders, and didn't disrupt the other soldiers. And that was all that was required. So what if people felt increasingly uncomfortable around him? In a place where the flesh rotting off your bones while you were still alive was the baseline of concern, a little personality conflict ranked several levels below a paper cut. Lawrence, for his part, dealt with it at his blah, 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 blah. Lawrence, for his part, dealt with it as he always had. That is to say, remained totally unaware of the avoidance. The same way a man blind from birth cannot mourn the memory of color, Corporal Lawrence couldn't bemoan a lack of company. He was quiet, as he had nobody to talk to, and still as he had nothing to do for long stretches of time. The enemy trench, less than a mile away, had gone silent for several days, letting boredom and nervousness sink in even more than normal, coupled with the unease that seemed to radiate off of Lawrence like heat waves. The worst part was that there was no distinct reason to dislike the corporal. He was a he was a plain man, average height, average build, bland of voice and action. Nobody could recall him raising his voice in joy or anger. He did have the occasional odd mannerisms, however. He tended to stare at he tended to stare a beat or two longer than was acceptable at people. He rarely slept as well, and bunkmates said he would mumble in his sleep almost constantly. The content of those not okay. Hold on, sorry. The content of those nocturnal ramblings, when they could be understood, were often odd and potentially unsettling. One private moved to another barracks when he heard the name of his daughter pass Corporal Lawrence's lips, followed by a bubbling, muffled giggle. It only took you 20 minutes to be able to type. It was strong. It was strongly theorized that he was sent over to the trench by his commanders more out of a desire to have him away and for his minimal combat skills. He and 14 of his fellows were sent across the nightmarishly scarred waste of the no man's land between the trenches to recon, recon, reconnoiter, reconnoiter the enemy trench and secure it if possible. Many seemed to hope that Lawrence would have the opportunity to prove his devotion to his country by making the ultimate sacrifice for it. It was while he was gone, that 3 day gap as the men held their breath, waiting for a surprise volley of shells, that someone started asking questions. Whereas before it was almost too taboo to speak of Corporal Lawrence, since the departure of both him and his aura, rumor seemed to descend with the passion of the denied. Nobody remembered him ever talking of home. No sweet smelling letters came, no soggy, dirt streaked letters left. He mentioned his dreams often, and griped sometimes with the men over missed food or pleasures, but never with any real passion. Questions started to float among even the higher levels of the command. Nobody was able to actually find his station orders. He'd come in with a squad of reinforcements transferred from France, but there was no paperwork. The rest of the reinforcement squad had never seen the man before, and he had been lumped in with them the night before the trip. Along with the snips and scraps of the other squads decimated by the Germans, whispers filtered among the grunts of the corporal being a curse. Nearly every man who shared a bunkhouse with him had gotten trench foot, and the rooms he haunted always seemed to smell more musty and sickly sweet, even for the trench. The men sent over the no man's land with Corporal Lawrence heard and cared for none of this. Just another man among many, with all death certificates waiting a stamp that could fall at any moment. They moved fast and low from crater to crater, slipping over slick mud and barbed wire. The only thing that seemed to grow in that blasted waste, charging the last spurt into that trench. They were greeted not with the harsh bark of German orders and rifles, but a dense, close silence. Preparing for ambush, the men started to filter out into the tunnels and holes of the trench. The men, already nervous, were not calmed by their investigation. The trenches sank. The trenches stank of mold, sweat, and a thin undertaste of rotten fruit. A vile, cloying slime seemed to have pooled in every divot and crack, sticky as glue and itchy on the flesh. In a world where rats and insects would try to snatch food from your mouth even as you ate, they saw nothing alive. Not so much as a fly. An armory lay in chaos, munitions spilled on the ground, rifles tossed like pickup sticks. A mess hall had been reduced to ruins, the tables and chairs piled in the center of the room, charred and twisted, the rations seemingly stamped into the dirt by many feet, and still nothing, alive or dead, was found by the increasingly anxious soldiers. Private Dixon found the first body and managed to cry out before vomiting. They knew it had been a man only because nothing else of that size could have been there. It lay on the floor of the barracks, the entire floor. The flesh of it had been smeared somehow, spread like butter over the rough dirt floor. Bones, already looking pitted and rotten, stuck out at random angles like dead trees in a still swamp. The skull rested the skull rested on the highest bunk facing the doorway. 10 gleamed white fingertip bones crammed into the cracked eye sockets. As one man went to examine it, he found the back of the skull had been crushed open, the rotting, sagging sponge of a tongue stuffed into the otherwise dry cavity. More remains were found, each seemingly more unsettling and strange than the last. A ring of hands in a sandbag watch post, 10 of them, fingers interlaced like a basket, the wrist ragged and broken. 2 men in a tunnel, skin leathery and thin as mummies, eye sockets staring and empty, mouths locked impossibly wide, their clothes mere rags under an oily black scum. The latrines and even the hardest back, gagging and shivering, overflowing with excrement and oval and awful and off An awful goblets of meat bobbed and oozed into foul sludge. The whole surface dotted with what looked like thousands of clean, slick eyeballs, nerves, and tendons fanning out like goldfish tails. Corporal Lawrence was the first to find the hole. The other men loudly debated the better part of the valor and their rapid withdrawal from the nightmare trench. It was small, in a section of fresh digging, the start of a new arm of trenches projecting closer to the enemy lines. No more than 4 feet across, it seemed to be the accidental uncovering of a natural chamber, the empty blackness of it defying investigation. Private Dixon recovered and blessedly numb from his previous ordeal, saw the corporal prod the edge with his boot, then crouched to peer in, then suddenly slid in head first before the private could so much as utter a shout of question. The private was a good soldier, and rushed to the perceived distress of his fellow. When questioned later, he could provide little illumination as to what happened over the 2 minutes Corporal Lawrence spent in the hole. He could see nothing. The light of a torch seemed gobbled up a few feet into the dense blackness, and there were sounds, the rustles of movement over loose stone or rubble, an odd liquid shifting, a dry rustle that made him think of the insect huts that he'd used to collect in the summer. He was shouted for aid. There was a sudden upwelling of a repulsive stench, like a reptile house gone sour and old, and his fellow soldiers found him retching helplessly beside the hole when they came around the turn. It was as they rushed to Private Dixon's aid that the hand emerged from the hole. They stopped and raised rifles as one body, roaring for the owner of that pale, trembling hand to identify himself. As they watched, another hand joined the first, followed by the pale, shivering head of Corporal Lawrence. He was streaked and smeared with a tarry black ooze, hacking and coughing thinly as he hauled his body up beside that of the gasping private. As they moved to help the men, the corporal vomited up a heavy stream of the same repulsive slime that coated his body in smears and globs, his curled, shuddering body voiding more of it into the saturated, fouled pants. They were hesitant to touch him, finally doing so after the seemingly endless river of grime stopped pouring from him. He was insensible, eyes rolling and wide, body as limp as a boned fish. The men quit the trench with all speed. Half dragging the corporal, they ran with no thought to cover or death, only escape. They crossed in record time, falling into their home trench like so much cordwood, gasping and shivering. One man, known to have bludgeoned a German to death with a brick, curled on the floor in a sobbing heap, in heaps and heaps. The commander moved quickly, isolating the man and trying to calm the most lucid for a report. What spilled out would have been immediately dismissed as lies and hallucinations were it not for the earnest, pleading stares of those reporting. Command calmed them with explanations of battle fatigue and strange gas weapon tests, and stared silent, focused stares as the co- focused stares as the cowed men were ushered out. Corporal Lawrence had little to report. Of his time in the hole, he could, or would say, little. He stated that he had slipped and fallen into what may have been some long blocked underground pool, or perhaps a buried latrine. Of the sounds and smells reported by the private, he had nothing to say, only that he had struggled a short time and then managed to get back out just as the men arrived. Truly, he seemed none the worse for wear. In fact, he seemed in better spirits than many had remembered ever seeing him, favoring the commander with a wide, giddy smile as he was dismissed with a warning not to discuss the events. The corporal proved a changed man over the next few days. He was more talkative, but quickly had men wishing for his old, unsettling silence. He rambled about the joys of close spaces, of creation and destruction, and seemed to spring up all around them. about human pleasures missed, the dimensions and ages of which made some men threaten Corporal Lawrence with a quiet and ignoble death which only seemed to stretch the near constant smile on his face even wider. Private Dixon, one of the corporal's bunkmates, whispered to a friend that he had woken once to find the corporal standing over him in the night, his eyes as bright and flat as silver dollars. They found the private the next day, snarled in barbed wire, his intestines spread nearly 10 foot around him in every direction. Not one man from that trench survived the Great War, although few died in battle. A wave of sickness took the trench a few days after Private Dixon's death, a strange wasting sickness. It seemed to eat the flesh like acid, men waking to find previously healthy flesh eaten down to the bone, oozing and blackened. A sergeant was found in a latrine, beset by a living carpet of rats. They refused to quit the body even when shot, and attacked several men before the body was recovered. Relief finally came, the bulk of the men being sent to various hospitals, many wasting away before they had even reached a bed. Corporal Lawrence was remanded to a French mental ward, transferred after several complaints from the hospital proper where he was first sent. It seemed his behavior hinted at a growing mental imbalance, culminating with an attempted sexual assault of a nurse, which ended with the loss of 3 fingers from a right hand and the vision in a right eye. The corporal would rant quietly to the other patients, whispers about endless halls, pursuits in the dark, flesh laid out like pages of a book. It was dismissed as so much war fatigue, even as his behavior grew less violent and more unsettling. He vanished several times from the ward, only to appear several hours later as if nothing had happened. When pressed, he would begin to sing My Bonnie Lies Over the Sea in an endless monotone until the doctors left exasperated. Others in the ward clamored to be transferred from the whispering madman. A stale, musty foulness seemed to sit in the air wherever he stayed. The incidents of infection and the strange consuming sickness that had beset his home trench seemed to follow him like a cloud. Numerous attempts were made to transfer the man, only to be met with bureaucratic confusion. No records were found of the man, no entry papers, commendations, or incidents, not even a birth certificate. Through it all, he sat for hours on end, cross legged on his bed, occasionally humming tunelessly or rambling off the names of his ward mates between short, bubbling giggles. Corporal Lawrence and 18 men vanished one November night between a 5-minute nurse rotation at 3 in the morning. The room reeked of rust, oil, mold, and sweet rot. Thick, black swaths of crumbling ooze coated the beds and several of the walls. Wide patches of it smeared and eating into the floor. Of the men there was no sign at first. As they searched, one nurse shifted a bed one nurse shifted a bed aside, only to shriek and nearly trip across one of the sunken, reeking depressions on the floor, in a tight, perfect spiral, where it appeared to be hundreds of teeth, resting neatly on the floor. After counting, they accounted for the total of all the teeth of every living soul in that ward but one. The corporal was never found, nor were the men. The incident was swallowed by the constant barrage of horrors from the front and forgotten with ease. Stories of a cursed trench wandered across the front lines, often squelched for being bad luck. Still they came, stories of strange deaths, of disappearing men found days later alive but broken and twisted beyond comprehension, stories of a strange, dark figure stalking the bomb-ridden towns of Europe. Hello, Kit Bina. This may be the only known image of Corporal Lawrence. I'm not going to read that part because you can't see the image. All right, well, there was that story. Rest my eyes for a minute. So what up, everybody? Yo! So how's everybody doing? Everybody good? Everybody good today? Don't forget to like and share and sub and check out everybody else's channel too. Everybody support each other here. That's what this is for. To listen to some stories and then support each other. Oh man, my back. Oh, you're making your vegan dinner slaughtered in bacon? Talking about forewarnings? Yeah. Forewarning's been feeling pretty rough lately. And remember, if you have a story that you would like me to read, then please, by all means, send me the link to it. Either on Twitter, let me check my Twitter. Yep, either on Twitter or on Discord, if you're on my Discord, or you can email it to me. I will do a link to my email. There is my email if anyone has a story. Hey, what up, Swamp Dweller? How you doing tonight, man? No, I made it very clear that forewarnings need to get her voice back in line too, or else. Did you come here from a tweet, Swamp Dweller? What tweet? Who tweeted it? Why don't you tweet it, Swamp Dweller? That'd be cool. Guess I'll find another story to read here. Hey, whoring me is not only encouraged, but also appreciated. All right, let's find another story. I don't think I've read this one before. That damn buzzing sound. Oh, I wish you luck, Kit Bina. I hope your surgery goes quite well for you. Hope it takes care of whatever the issue is without any complications at all whatsoever. Alrighty. Now, that damn buzzing sound is written by someone named Ariel Lowe. For the past few days, I've been hearing this intermittent buzzing sound. At first, I thought I'd become used to it and had stopped hearing it entirely. But to me, it just became more obnoxious over time. It transformed into something akin to a constant vibrating noise in the back of my head. It was difficult to focus on anything. It became so bad that I had trouble sleeping, and it's beyond me how my parents never noticed it. You know what they say, though? You lose hearing with age, so I wasn't surprised when they gave me confused looks. Tyler, my neighbor, heard it, though, and I was relieved at that. It meant that I wasn't going crazy. He's actually the one that brought it up when we were in my bedroom playing video games. With him at my side, I became determined to find the source of this noise. We searched my house first and placed our ears all over the walls. The buzzing sound never seemed to become stronger or weaker, so we went outside. My original thought was that something was wrong with the air conditioning unit. If I was right, it would explain why the sound transferred throughout the entire house. Needless to say, my theory was wrong. We stood beside the thrumming unit, watching the gigantic fan spin around inside. The unit was vibrating, but it wasn't the sound we were looking for. However, we realized the sound was louder outside than it had been in my room. Searching my backyard up and down, we came to a stop at the wooden face. I think that's supposed to say fence. We came to a stop at the wooden fence surrounding the yard. We placed our ears to the fence and exchanged a knowing stare. That sound was coming from beyond the fence, and that was enough for both of us. We climbed the fence and dropped easily to the other side. The area beyond my backyard was filled with untouched forest. I had been over my fence a few times when I'd accidentally kicked a soccer ball over, but not often enough to really explore. My parents always complained about there being a poison ivy everywhere, and there was. We skirted around it and created a path without a problem. It was really bizarre, though. All we could hear was this buzzing sound, nothing else. I mean, we could just barely hear the leaves and sticks crackling beneath our feet. But all other sounds seemed absent. There were no birds chirping, which was the weirdest part for me. You'd be hard pressed to find an area of wood where there aren't any birds constantly singing to each other. As we kept walking, the buzzing sound grew louder, and eventually we couldn't see my fence anymore. We stopped several yards from a cluster of trees covered in tumor-like growths. We just stood there, staring at it. Neither of us could explain what they were. They appeared like they were part of the tree, as if the bark had bubbled outward in these strange formations. Trees can actually develop to form growths called burls, something I learned in hindsight. Naturally, though, our first thoughts were to poke it, but both of us were too chicken to get any closer. So we grabbed rocks instead. It only took one toss. Tyler was a baseball player. The rocks collided with one of the large growths, and upon contact, the growth exploded outward, sending chunks flying. Not even seconds later, bees, thousands of bees, swarmed out of the opening and formed into a thick, throbbing mass. Both of us screamed and ran. I'd never run faster in all my life. The bees were hot on our heels, and I could feel their stingers plunging into my arms, my back, my legs, everywhere they could swarm. I don't remember hopping the fence or how I arrived at my front yard, but I must have been screaming bloody murder. I stripped down to my underwear, and my mom began spraying me and the persistent bees with the garden hose. The icy, pressurized water didn't hurt as bad as the stings or the welts that formed instantly. I was ushered into the kitchen, given a towel, and my mom began meticulously removing the stingers with a pair of tweezers. She lost count how many she removed from my body. I was only allowed to change into dry underwear since the stings needed to be iced, and the swelling and welts had been unimaginable. And now I understand how people can die from bee stings. I was forced onto the couch with ice packs positioned all over my body. The majority of the stings were on my back, so I laid on my stomach and must have passed out some time later. I woke the next day in the same position, and the ice packs had been removed. My mom refused to let me change into comfortable clothing until she inspected all the welts. Thankfully, the swelling had reduced significantly since the previous day. Over a bowl of soup, I learned that my parents called an exterminator after the incident. Apparently, there had been bees angrily flying around our yard and some of the neighbors' yards. By that point, everyone on our street could hear the enraged buzzing. The exterminator arrived promptly and followed the trail of chaotic bees back to the nest. The man actually told me my parent The man actually told my parents that it had been the largest colony he had ever seen. He sprayed so many chemicals that he didn't want anyone near the area. Not that anyone wanted to go investigate for themselves. The whole situation made me feel like a complete idiot. How could we have been so stupid? My only consolation was that Tyler might have suffered just as bad as me with the bee stings. I brought this up to my parents and asked how bad his injuries were. My mother gave me this petrified expression that I'll never forget. There had been nobody behind me when I raced around the side of my house. She hadn't even been aware that Tyler had gone back there with me. I felt guilty, beyond guilty, for the next few days. Horrible images of Tyler being swarmed consumed me. I swore that he had been right beside me. What made me feel worse was that the exterminator never saw anyone. If Tyler had fallen and been injured, the exterminator would have known because he had to search the entire area for nests and make sure everything was sprayed with pesticides. About a week after the incident, Tyler was still missing. I decided to search the area for myself, but I wasn't going unprepared. I grabbed a can of my mother's hairspray along with a lighter from the kitchen. If any of these bees were still kicking, then I wanted protection. I hopped the fence and moved slowly through the forest. My right hand clenched tightly on the hairspray. The distance to the nest was much further than I remembered. I knew that I had arrived when I heard a thick crunch beneath my shoes. I glanced down and felt a shiver rush through my body. The entire ground was layered with bee corpses. I couldn't see the dirt or grass. In some areas, the bees just piled on top of each other. I was on my last nerve when I approached the nest, trying my best to ignore the sickening crunch, the sickening crunches underfoot. I narrowed my eyes at the nest that we destroyed, and when I rounded the tree, the rest of the nest became apparent, nearly 10 times larger. I continuously nudged one of the nests, which crumbled and revealed thick wax and honeycomb. Dead bees trapped inside the nest oozed through the opening, and it was enough to turn my stomach. I grumbled beneath my breath and began poking the nest with more confidence, watching more of the pieces fall to the ground. That was when I heard the buzzing return. My heart skipped several beats, and I nearly stumbled backwards and landed in the disgusting ruin of dead bees. I sprinted back several feet and raised the hairspray and lighter, watching the nest from all angles. These bees could appear from anywhere. They must have formed their nest throughout this cluster of trees, and it was very possible that their nest extended into the ground as well and beneath the roots. I bit my lip and waited for the swarm to appear like last time, but they never did. Instead, an odd and disturbing sight took me by surprise, enough for me to lower my guard. I left the clearing filled with dead bees and stepped through several bushes, trying to confirm what I was seeing. My whole body quivered, and I wanted to call out. My voice failed me, though, and it might have saved my life. Not even 10 yards from me was Tyler. He was just standing there with his back facing me. Something was wrong. His movements were off. His body was twitching involuntarily, and when he took a step, his posture was rigid while his arms were locked in janky positions. Despite the horrible feeling in my gut, I wanted to call out to him. My concern quickly transformed into fear. Tyler turned and lolled his head aside as if his neck were broken. He knew I was there, yet he couldn't see me. His eyes were gone. Two dark sockets stared back at me with bees crawling out of them. Sores layered his flesh, which had turned into gaping holes, and viscous fluid was running down his chin. I was too scared to move. I only ran when Tyler began lumbering towards me, swaying back and forth and twitching. For the second time, I screamed and ran for the hills, trying to outrun the crashing coming from behind me. When I scrambled over the fence, I felt the wood scraping my skin, but I didn't care. I pounded on my back door crazily and slammed it shut once my mother let me inside. She didn't understand much of what I was saying since I was hysterical, but she gathered that I'd found Tyler's body in the woods. By the time the police had arrived, they waited for me to calm down so I could explain what I saw. It was a mess, and they must have thought that I was nuts. They searched in the area where I saw Tyler, but they didn't find him. They found his body yards upon yards further away by a creek. Tyler had been reclined on his knees with his forehead against the ground, immobile and dead. I refused to ID him. I couldn't see those empty eye sockets again. When I recovered from the event, I wanted to know what happened. I emailed the pathologist who performed Tyler's autopsy and practically begged for answers. I needed a logical explanation for what I saw. He explained how they were going through the routine procedure when they hit a minor roadblock. When they sliced Tyler open, dead bees poured out. His body had been literally bloated with bees. His eyes were missing, his jaw was broken, completely unhinged. His teeth were gone, along with his tongue, which was replaced with wax. The worst part was this: his organs were gone. All that was left was the All that was left was the skeleton, muscles, and tissue, which seemed to be the base for the extreme amounts of honeycomb within his chest cavity. The pathologist's only theory was that the bees devoured his organs, but bees aren't carnivorous. The only way I can explain this is this. There's a scientific concept called microevolution, and it's definitely as evolutionary. What? And it's defined as evolutionary change within the species or a small group of organisms, especially over a short period. It must have been triggered by the pesticides. It must have. See, this story kind of reminded me of Ren Ryder's story, Bee Infestation. I don't know which one was written first, but they sounded like they came from the same town. The bees' nipples? How many nipples do bees have? What's up, Night Companion? What's up, CR? CR, I already read that story. "36 sets of nipples. That's impressive. That is an impressive display of nipples. Anyone could agree with that. I mean, anything with 72 nipples is a friend of mine. I mean, that's just the way it is. If there was a slide made of nipples. Yeah, sorry, CR. You missed the story, bro. I apologize. It was interesting, though. Freakishly long nipples sticking up. Why do they have to be freakishly long nipples? It seems like that would make it hard to slide. Are they lubricated or something? It was The Young Man, I think it was called. Corporal Lawrence. Mandy, are they lubricated nipples? Because it seems like it'd be hard to slide down a slide with abnormally large nipples on it. I mean, come on. Are you talking about like baby bottle nipples that are like on a bottle? Because that's just kind of weird. I thought you were talking about like booby nipples. That's way less weird. Nipples the size of dinner plates. All right. This next story is called Print by Clown Prince 13. When I was young, I was always told the sounds I heard at night were made up. It's just a figment of your imagination, my father would always tell me, but every night as I laid tiredly on my stomach, covered from head to toe in blankets, I could have sworn I heard what almost sounded like someone tapping their fingernails across the floor of the attic above my bedroom. Whenever I heard it, usually around the first night of every month, it would begin ever so quietly. I It would always start out with just a few taps, repeating themselves for a few hours some nights and only seconds on the others. That was usually enough for me to start jumping into my parents' bed those nights, but as I got older, my parents would start locking their bedroom door, insistent upon the belief that my imagination was just getting the better of me. But I knew something wasn't right. I usually would try to sneak out of my bedroom those nights. I'd wait silently under my covers, listening until I heard the latch of my parents' bedroom door shut close. Then I'd silently sneak downstairs and sleep on the couch those nights, just to avoid the noises coming from the attic. Not long after, my 8th birthday finally came around. Being a kid, of course, I was ecstatic. And at my party, after all my friends had given me their gifts, my mother came out and said that there was still one last surprise for me, but I had to close my eyes. Reluctantly, I closed them, expecting my father to come out and pull some mean trick like shove some birthday cake against my face, but instead I heard nothing but some silent giggling from a couple of friends and something hairy and what could only really be described at the time as wiggly was slowly placed into my extended arms. After getting the go ahead from my mother, I lifted my eyelids to see a small, sandy brown puppy laying across my arms. I immediately loved the little dog. I would eventually name Queenie after a song my mom would listen to in the car on a regular basis. Anyways, over the course of the next month, me and Queenie bonded completely, becoming practically inseparable. The only catch was in order to stop her from tearing the house apart while we slept, I had to keep her with me in my bedroom every single night. The first of the next month came before I knew it, and much sooner than I would have liked. At least this time, I knew I wouldn't have to handle it by myself. I'd have Queenie with me. After an hour of trying to fall asleep with frustratingly insignificant results, the nefarious tapping started, slowly at first, like a dripping faucet, but by the end of the 2 hours in which it took place, it was like a thundering rainfall. Then, as if on cue, it stopped abruptly, only to be followed by a deep scratching noise, as if nails were being dug into the floor above me. Instantly, Queenie began barking like nothing I had heard from her before, an almost vicious, snarling bark that combined with the intense scratching the un- hide the under caused me to hide under my blankets with pillows on either side of my head, desperately trying to block out the terrible noises. After what seemed like forever, I finally poked my head out from beneath the covers to discover that the noise had finally stopped. I spent the rest of the night holding Queenie close, wishing my insomnia would fade just as the noises had. Lubricated titty slide. I would eventually spend the next month desperately trying to think of a way out of staying in a I would eventually spend the next month desperately trying to think of a way out of staying in my room so that I wouldn't have to listen to those horrifying sounds coming from the attic above me. Being a child, of course, I never really had any functional ideas, and before I knew it, the inevitable first of the month was this coming weekend. About to rear its ugly head. Terrified by the thought of spending another night listening to the noises from the attic, I ended up coming home from school in tears. Walking through the front door to greet my mother, I instantly recognized another figure in the living room, my Uncle Mick. Without delay, my uncle came over to me and gave me a hug. "What's wrong, bud?" he asked, obviously noticing the tears going down my face. I replied, explaining all the noises and Queenie's barking, figuring, just as my parents, that this was just my imagination and an overactive puppy getting the better of me. He came up with a solution. The plan was, since he was staying over the weekend, he'd sleep in the attic above me to make sure that noises didn't bother me. Later, after a long dinner, I eventually made my way into bed with Queenie. Just as I was about to fall asleep, a terrible thought came through my head. What if Uncle Mick didn't get woken up by the noises, and whatever was making them attacked him in his sleep? I wasn't about to take a chance on losing my favorite uncle, so as fast as I could, I jumped out of bed with Queenie by my side and ran downstairs to the living room where him and my parents were chatting and drinking coffee. I told my uncle that he had better take Queenie with him to bed, just in case, masking his frustrations of having to sleep with what he thought was just a yappy little puppy in his room. He agreed and finally com- and kind and finally comforted, I returned to my bed for the night. I had just fallen asleep for the night when I was abruptly snatched from my dormancy to the sound of the confounded tapping, which within almost a second promptly drifted into deep scratches. I lay in my bed, paralyzed with fear, hoping to God that my uncle and Queenie were all right as the baleful scratches continued to get louder, each scratch more intense than the last. I couldn't help but imagine some grotesque, gauntly creature slowly ripping my loved ones apart with its long claws while I lay in my bed, unknowing and helpless to anything that may be lurking in the room above me. After 30 minutes, the scratching finally ended, only to be replaced with a slow wheezing sound resounding off the walls in such a way it almost seemed as if its source was directly beside me. I figured something terrible must have happened to my uncle, and I was trapped, hidden under the covers, forced to listen to his final breaths. I had remained that way for what felt like multiple hours until eventually I drifted off to sleep, awoke the next morning by the sunlight pouring into the room. Sitting up, my nerves quickly alerted me to the deep cut on the back of my neck that I must have gotten from a screw astray in my bed. Suddenly, my thoughts were quickly redirected to the fate of my uncle. With tears slowly making their way out of my eyes, I leaped up, legs carrying me as fast as they could upstairs to my attic, where I imagined I would find the floor covered with blood and entrails of my uncle. Bracing myself, I slowly turned the doorknob open, only to be greeted by my uncle and Queenie, freshly woken up. "Morning, bud," my Uncle Mick said, as Queenie quickly addressed my presence with a few licks of my hand. "How'd you sleep?" "Good," I replied. "Did you hear any of those noises I told you about?" I asked. "Nope. Heard you yell heard you yell or something from your bedroom, but when I went to check on you, you were just laying there, fast asleep on your stomach." "Huh, that's weird," I murmured, then made my way down to my bedroom to get dressed. A couple days later, my mom was helping me clean my room when I noticed a puzzled look on her face. "What's wrong?" I asked. My mother looked at me. "Nothing, sweetie. I was just wondering how you got those handprints on your ceiling." At once, I realized the truth. Those noises weren't coming from the attic. They were coming from my ceiling. Later that week, I moved out of my room and into the attic. My dad would begin to use the room as an office, and eventually I got older and left for college, leaving behind my parents and 3-month-old baby brother. A few years later, however, I returned home for one of my regular visits to have my young brother come and tell me about his new bedroom that he got in Daddy's old office. My heart sank as he turned around. I couldn't help but to notice a small cut on the back of his neck. "What's up, student?" "Hello. How are you, student? Are you well?" "Oh, April, you don't have to guard over the chat. I have mods to do that. I'm sure Four Warnings would be more than happy to ravage and destroy anyone who disrupts the chat." Exactly. "Oh, what's up, Mig? You finally came to one of my live streams." Oh, you know what? Now I'm thinking about it, Meg, I knew that that was you because of that there name right there. Here's another story. "Something's Lurking in the Snow," written by Joy Killed. It was a cold winter night in a very, very remote town out in the middle of nowhere. A, de- a debate team from a larger city had driven out that morning and had done very well, not finishing until around midnight. When the bus finally set off, it was around 12:45. As students filed into the bus to go home, the driver turned on the strobe on the top of the bus, so if they had gotten into a wreck or anything, they could easily be seen. One boy in particular decided that he wasn't tired and just stared out the window as they began their drive home. The sounds of his teammates drifting into sleep surrounded him as he stared out of the window, forehead against the icy pane of glass. Flurries of snow drifted in and out of his vision, joining the white mass on the ground. They passed small patches of forest, followed by endless fields and even more forest. He noticed that every time the lights flashed, he would see images, creations of his imagination, like when someone dims the lights, seeing the faces and the shadows. These images became increasingly frightening, especially as they entered the wooded areas. After a while, he decided he should probably sleep, and he lay his head back against the seat. He fell into the lull of the driving bus, only half conscious when he looked back out of his window, and he saw a herd of deer, almost galloping towards the bus. They ran out in front of the bus, and he could see their eyes were wide and terrified. They were being hunted, quite obviously, and as the vehicle hit them, it began to pinwheel, spinning end over end in the fresh snow. I'm sorry. These people are on a school bus. You expect me to believe that a school bus hit some deer and was tumbling like this? Does that seem a little ridiculous to anyone else? I mean, it's a freaking school bus. It would have smoked them deer. Anyways, as we as we know, buses do not have seat belts. Backpacks, bodies, and glass were being tumbled around everywhere. The bus finally settled on its back in the snow. The boy was unconscious. His teammates had stopped breathing. Glass had shattered, fallen everywhere, covering everything in shimmery layers of surreality. The boy was the boy was one of the only survivors, one of two. Yeah, it's like some deer the size of a freaking mountain, is what it was. As he woke up several minutes after the bus had come to a stop, he noticed that he was on what once had been the ceiling. Warm fluid slid down his face, across his cheek, and onto the ground beside him. A piece of glass was embedded near his temple, small enough not to harm him too badly, but enough to make his forehead bleed. He reached up and he reached up and pulled it out as his eyes adjusted to the blackness of this winter's night. He lay down, unable to stand up without falling at this point, and hoping for some rescue, some person to find the wrecked bus. He began to hear soft shuffling outside of the bus, light feet in the snow circling it. It began at the it began at the front of the bus and circled until they came to a stop right about where he was. He thought maybe it was a rescue crew. He heard claws on metal climbing up the side of the bus and finally reaching the top. It wasn't human, he realized. The scraping and scratching, he heard a fist punch the roof above him. He was laying on the roof. Does anyone else remember that he was laying on the roof? The roof is on the ground. The story is horrible, but let us continue, shall we? Okay, hold on. He heard a fist punch the roof above him and let out a small gasp, quickly recovering his mouth as he heard whatever it was jump off the bus onto the ground again. He knew by now how wrong he was. This wasn't a rescue team. He also knew it was unlikely anyone else had survived, as he needed to get out as fast as he could. He began crawling over the backpacks, the bodies, and the wreckage, debris, and glass. He crawled to the front where the driver was slammed against the windshield, ignoring the pain in his hands. He scoped his surroundings. The door had been bent beyond repair. He would have to go out the windshield. He slowly moved the corpse. He slowly moved the corpse, surprised to find that the bus was still running, the headlights on. He hadn't noticed it before, but now he felt the bus vibrating, humming its life. He crawled out, still in a crouch, when he heard the shuffling noise again, right at the edge of his little dome of light. He looked up. Just inside the circle of light, he saw gnarled, white, inhuman clawed feet, and his eyes traveled up, seeking eyes exactly level to his. He, st- he straightened. So did the creature, up and up. He was no longer looking eye to eye. It was towering over him, staring down with dead, lifeless eyes, black pits in its ghostly skull. Behind him, he heard the motor begin to die, his circle of light receding as the creature moved towards him, staying just beyond the reach of light. He couldn't quite see it yet. Oh, thank you, Meg. He backed up against the bus, gripping the twisted metal as the creature grew near. He felt warm blood pooling in his hands as his grip tightened, the creature edging ever closer. He stared up at it, his black eyes and twisted mouth, teeth protruding over its lip. He opened his mouth, no sound coming out for a few seconds before he asked, his voice rising pitch with fear, "Who are you?" And the creature bent down, down, and down until until he was eye to eye with the boy, his hot breath on his face. He opened his twisted mouth ever so slowly, lips upturned in a ghastly grin, a grimace, and answered in a deep, bone-rattling voice, "Break." God, that story was fucking horrible. All right, well, none of that story made any sense. First of all, this bus driving down the road hits a deer and starts going like this. A bus, a whole fucking school bus, just flipping like a freaking ninja star. Dear Lord. And then it lands on the roof because it clearly said he was laying on the roof when he came to. But then that thing was clawing on the roof. And then But then I'm picturing, okay, so the thing is actually laying on the roof and he's crawling out of the windshield. Well, if you're crawling out of the windshield and it's laying on the roof, then you were like even with the ground, and then it was eye to eye with the ground. So that means this like rake thing was literally just like laying on the ground, waiting for him to come out. But then how'd you see his feet? So like none of it made any sense. It just didn't make any sense. Yeah, it was no, Horhive. It wasn't even a beautifully written piece of crap. It was just a piece of crap. Just a piece of crap. It didn't even make sense. Why is it even on there? That was sad. That was a sad story. And not because it was a sad story. It was just a sad story. But that's all right. That's the joy of not knowing what I'm reading until I'm reading it. As a matter of fact, that sucks so bad. Maybe I should go read some of their other stories and see if they've submitted more. Because now I can read them with a funny voice. Does Oh yeah, it was something about something in the snow or something, wasn't it? I don't even see it anymore. Maybe it just disappeared after I read it. Oh no, there it goes. All right, let's see if Joy Killed here wrote anything else, shall we? Oh no, that's the only one. Thank God. Well, thank you, Johnny. At least something was good. Well, Raven, I don't know. A bus hit the deer, and it just started flipping around like a ninja star, and that story was horrible. Horrible. All right. Actually, just I need to hit a cigarette after that. That was so sad. God damn, that was sad. April, just pass out. Just pass out listening to the cool, calm voice of Crow. Just go to sleep and leave it on. Just leave everything on and just sleep. It's quite all right. Well, Meg, it is 10:19 right now at the moment. 10:19. And everybody, please hit like, please subscribe if you're not subscribed, and please share on Facebook and Twitter, and I don't know where else you guys go on this stuff. I don't know, Gab or something. I don't know. Whatever. Share everywhere. Share the live stream, and let's see how many people we can get in here. Oh, well, Haley, you don't have to sleep. You can just listen to the voice. Just listen to it. How'd you like to? How'd y'all like the sound effects in the story today with the guy running? Better be careful with all that heavy panning. I might make myself pass out, right? Your time is 69:69. Interesting. Oh, see, this next story has to be good. It's written by a guy named Scare Lord. I mean, if you're Scare Lord, it has to be a good story, right? Johnny. Hey, it happens, man. New sponges can be nice. You know, that's cool. It can be nice. What's wrong, Haley? That's what I'm saying. But I was just, that was the sound effects, and then the thing I used was a little quiver in it, like that's what I did when he was eating it. I was like, all I had to do was like picture myself eating the intestines of some poor child. That's what I do when I make those sound effects. I gotta envision myself as this monster doing these things. What's a picture? Huh? Oh, I'll quiver. I'll quiver for Haley. Oh, oh, the little window thing back there. Yeah. See, I'm trying to make get the background set up and nice for everybody during the live stream, so it looks nice. Oh yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with eating entrails, right? All right, back to reading. This is called. Yeah, I am. I'm trying to get a backdrop for everybody so it doesn't look all like bland and boring behind me like it was before. Oh, Haley, your poor tongue. You just wait till I get a hold of you. It'll be my poor tongue. This story is called Wipe Your Feet, and it's written by somebody named Scare Lord, which guarantees it's going to be a good story. Wipe your feet when you come inside. Cliche, old school. Who does that, anyways? Well, the shit your grandmother tells you isn't always bad advice. Quite the contrary, really. I'm about to tell you a story you won't believe. A story that you will never leave me. No, I'm sorry. A story that will never leave me. A story about what exactly happens when you don't wipe your feet. And please, whoever finds this, heed my advice. Read the story. It's too late for me. It was a cold and wet Sunday afternoon. The sky was gray with post-storm clouds. I had just gotten off work at the town grocery store and was walking home. The roads were horrible, mud-lined streets, caking onto my shoes and soaking through into my socks. I just wanted to get home, take a warm shower, finally get dry and pass out. You'll kick whose ass later? You gonna kick my ass later? Don't threaten me with a good time. What do you mean I won't eat baby dragons? Food is food. I am not picky. As I walked, I began to feel unnaturally cold, more cold than normal for the temperature, surely. It was a sensation that seemed to radiate from inside me. I must have a fever, I thought. Some bozo at work got me sick. Soon after this, I thought I was torn from my pondering by a startling. Oh, yeah, okay, this is another well written. Some bozo at work got me sick. Soon after this thought, comma, I was torn from my pondering by a startling shout. "Hey, kid!" came the intrusive voice. I looked around nearby at the corner of Lucy and Elm. I live in a small city in the backwoods of Colorado. I'm sure you haven't been there. Said a decrepit old woman. Oh, well, and then I gotta say this and go, "Hey, kid!" Homeless by the looks of it. What? I snapped, annoyed by how obtrusive she seemed. "Come here. Sorry for scaring you. I really need to tell you this, though." She seemed sincere, so I figured I'd hear her out. I walked up to her slowly and asked, "Yeah? Well, what's so important, lady?" She cocked an eyebrow, hacked out the most disgusting smoker's laugh I ever heard, and said, "Why, son, you're gonna die. Haven't you ever wiped those grimy, stinky little piggies of yours afore stepping a foot in your house? Anyways, listen close, young'un, and you might be saved. Anyway, and I mean it, always wipe your feet afore stepping in anyone's house. Anybody, hear me? You're all in danger." It was about this point that I just wanted to laugh and walk away. Something in her eyes. It was fear, looking back. But at the time, I was just enthralled. I thanked her for her advice and walked away. Strange things happened on the way home. For example, I saw a bus pass in front of me. Not any bus, mind you, as I live in a small town deep in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. This was the town bus. It always has a picture of a homeless child on it asking for whoever cares to call whatever scam agency is funding whatever the fuck ever charity they advertise and give them their money. I'm pretty sure it was an ad from the 90s. Well, that day it had an ad for Clorox wipes. Not only that, as that by itself might not have been so strange, but the ad was specifically for shoes. Yes, shoes. New Shoe Goo brand Clorox wipes will clean the mud, dirt, and sweat right off your finest work boots. Order now. Strange. Strange? I thought so. I shook it off as a hallucination. You shook it off as a hallucination? You're walking home from the store and you're freaking hallucinating? Are you okay, dude? It's like a problem, right? What the until I came to my street. At the corner of my street is a stop sign. Any normal day, when normal things are happening in a normal manner, it's an ordinary stop sign. This day, it had a shoe scrub attached to it. No, tied to the stop sign with barbed wire. A note hung off one of the barbs, written in plain white paper. It said simply, "Wipe your feet," in red paint. Looking back, I'm not sure it was paint. Well, at this point, I was pretty sure I had gotten the message, and I was scared. I began running towards my house. It was just a block away then. My cell phone rang. It was my mother. Fuck. Hello? I panted out of breath. Hi, Aaron, are you okay? Yes, mother. What do you need? I've had the strangest long. This is how this guy talks. Yes, mother. What do you need? I've had the strangest, longest day and just want to go home and go to bed. Well, I just called to check in. Don't forget to wash up the dishes and clean after yourself, and don't track mud into the house. I've seen the weather reports and won't be doing any cleaning up after you. Okay, Mom, I replied. The same old phone call I get every time she leaves town. I wish I'd listened to her. I'll never forget her. All she ever tried to do was care about me. Oh, I forgot to mention, I live with my mother and she's a major clean freak. Anyways, I will continue with my story. Okay, well, thanks, Mom. I won't forget. I have to go now. My day has been really weird, I started. Oh, and don't forget to pick up the deposit I left for you. I left. Oh, and don't forget to pick up the deposit I left you for grocery shopping. You haven't forgotten that I need you to shop for me the day before I get back, have you, Aaron? I smiled. Always the paranoid one, my mother. No, Mom, I haven't, but my. She interrupted again. I'm sorry, Aaron. I have to go. Please don't forget, the bank closes in an hour your time, I believe. I love you, and I'm late for my meeting, and I need to clean the mud off the hotel carpet before I go. I don't want to be rude. Bye, honey. Just like that. Off to the bank, then, I guess. I had completely forgotten in the strangeness of my evening. I turned around and walked down the street. I forgot if the note was still attached to the stop sign, but I think I'd have noticed it. Either way, a half-hour walk later, I found the bank was closed for repairs. Apparently, part of the bank had sunken into the ground overnight. There was police tape around the parking lot and a lot of emergency staff all around the scene. I decided to call my mother. The I had decided to call my mother the tomorrow. Mom, you're the tomorrow. I decided to call my mother the tomorrow and ask her what she wanted to do since the bank appeared to be out of business. In the meantime, I tried to investigate. The police wouldn't say anything to me. What the little journalist and what the little journalist and reporters that were there were being kept in the dark as well. I think someone died. I'm sure of it now, actually. Suffice to say, 2 hours after I had originally left work, I finally came to my doorstep. I was exhausted and had completely forgotten the old lady, the bus, and the stop sign. I opened the door, kicked my feet against the step to remove the loosest mud, and trudged straight inside to my room, leaving tracks on the carpet just as my mother had asked me not to. I flopped onto my bed without even taking off my shoes and fell asleep. An unknown amount of time later, long after sundown, I'm sure. I've been writing these events for about an hour now. I was awoke by my I was awoke by my boots. My boots were moving. The laces were whipping against my shins. They tugged and pulled and dropped off my feet. I jumped up, terrified and sure that I must be dreaming. To my dismay, I still have not woken up if this is a dream. My boot shot out of the room, seemingly sliding along ice. I got tentative I I got tentatively got out of bed and followed them. They left mud streaks all the way to the living room. The tracks I had left earlier were gone. They were seemingly replaced by lines of thick, black, mud looking marks going up the walls and coagulating on the ceiling in a bubbling, writhing mess of mud, a large puddle, seemingly. There was a strange there was a strange noise coming from the mass on the ceiling. It was a faint screaming sound, many voices all at once, mixed with a growling and hissing that must have come from a creature I cannot begin to imagine. The mud puddle seemed, from my experience in horror stories and RPG games, to be a portal to some hellish world. What the fuck? Oh man, I'm sorry. I apologize. As soon as I thought this, something began to come out of the horrifying puddle. An arm. Human by the looks of it, but all black and earthly brown. Was it all black or was it earthly brown? Like mud. The hand was webbed with a muddy, black, tar looking substance. But it had webbed hand. And that's not a human arm, bro. Tar looking substance which was dripping off the fingers onto the carpet. I was done. I had seen enough. I bolted for the door, going around the mass on the ceiling, and, to my surprise and ultimate horror, the tar substance went for the door as well. 1,000 small black droplets moved faster than I could blink. Slug like to the door. What? That doesn't even make sense. I would take a shot if I had one. I don't have any. This doesn't even make sense. 1,000 small black droplets moved faster than I can blink, slug like, to the door, slithering up it, and encased the knob in a sticky black goop. I dared not touch it and opted instead to kick the door open. No dice. The door splintered under the force of my kick and swung inwards to reveal a sight that made my heart stop. Behind the door was a wall of mud and tar. In this wall were dozens of faces, seemingly encased in the mud with all different looks of sheer horror on them. And right in the middle of this wall of terror, a familiar bank sign encrusted in the mud. I turned and ran for the nearest window. I threw open the blinds only to come face to face with my mother, or a mud portrait of my mother. She looked more terrified than I had seen her in my entire life. I nearly vomited from fear. Swinging back around, I was dismayed to see the arm coming out of the ceiling had developed a shoulder and an egg-shaped ball of mud seemingly ahead. The arm was swinging lazily, attempting to grab at my boots. I ran for the basement, as the basement door was the only locking door in our tiny one and a half story house, the half being the tiny unfinished basement. It doesn't count as a story. It was more of a storage cellar, 200 square feet and made entirely of smooth garage floor concrete. I locked the basement door behind me and ran downstairs, sitting in the corner. It has been about 20 minutes, judging by my phone, which has recently died. I was using it to type out these events on my... All right, listen to this. This gets good. It's been about 20 minutes, judging by my phone, which has recently died. I was using it to type out these events on my note app. Now I'm writing this shit on some sticky notes with a near dead pen I found in my mother's sewing equipment. About 10 minutes ago, I heard a thump come from the overhead. I think that thing, whatever it is, has finished spawning out of whatever portal and the mud created. I need to listen to old crazy women in the future if I have a future. Oh God, what does it want? So first of all, how do we read the first part of this if it's on a dead phone? We're really getting the winners tonight. We are really getting these winning stories tonight, guys. The door just opened. It's coming down the stairs. It's wearing my boots. It looks just like me. Oh, God, make it stop. End document. This transcript of notes found in. Oh, okay, now it explains. This transcription of notes found in Aaron Cobalt's phone. The residence of before mentioned and his mother, Anne Marie Cobalt, has gone missing seemingly overnight with no eyewitness reports or disturbance reports from any of the surrounding neighbors. In place of the foundation of address removed was a larger crater filled with tar. Retrieval teams were able to remove most of the tar and found only Aaron's phone, boots with DNA matching Aaron's, and a pad of sticky notes. They were all strangely preserved and unharmed by the tar. This report is being matched to a nearly identical report involving Aaron's mother and the aforementioned Anna Marie Cobalt, where the motel room in California was sunken into the ground and left behind a similar pit of tar. Only her phone, with a voice message following, and her boots were retrieved. Another report came a day earlier from the bank of town name removed. 13 people have gone missing in these reports. Further investigation is pending. Following is a transcript of the voice message found on Miss Cobalt's phone. Hello? Hello? I'm leaving this so hopefully someone finds it. My phone has no service and... Shuffling and terrified screams. Oh, God. She's almost got me. Whatever the fuck. My phone won't even dial 911. What kind of shit service even is this? Anyways, there is a thing, me but not me, mud me. It came out of the wall. I came back from my meeting. More screaming voice is becoming more frantic. Oh, God, why? Message ends. Report written 0302 2015. Lieutenant Damon Ruger, Colorado State Patrol. How'd she leave a voicemail? This is just ridiculous. Why? It sucks for warnings. Hey, what up, Jeep Things Outdoors? Thanks for coming in. If there's anyone else here that I have not greeted, I apologize. I was reading a horrible story. Yep, sure was. All right, here is a short one. No, it was Scare Lord. The writer calls himself Scare Lord. It was horrible. Johnny, right? Right? Yeah, I told you yours was good. And yeah, apparently I am a good author if this is the crap that people are putting on the internet. You know? All right. This one is called Humanity by Horror Fanatic 3669. Around me are the sounds of panic and horror. Gunshots fill the once silent air, and people in white lab coats are screaming and running past my room. I know they are because I can see them through the reflective wall that shows my own reflection. How is this possible, you might ask? Well, I was once the hope for humanity. This is how it began. I was 13 and still in some sort of life stitched together, if you could call it that. My father was non-existent, and my mother trying to form a life out of broken pieces scattered all over the floor. I had no social life. I still find it very hard to open up to people and even share my ideas. I was a loner, and my only friends were books. I always knew there was something wrong with me. I never liked to talk to anyone, which made people think I was dim-witted. But actually, I'm very smart. In 7th grade, I was taking algebra and so on. Next is the fact I hear voices. I shouldn't say voices. It's mostly one voice telling me what will happen: the bombing of 9/11, or a volcano that will bring the deaths of thousands across the globe. Sometimes I can hear the dialogue associated with the event: a newborn child crying, or an old person dying of cancer breathing in their last breath. I'm sorry, I'm probably boring you. I will cut to the point. Last week, World War III began, and an infectious disease spread like wildfire across the country. It made people go crazy, not like zombies, but worse. These creatures' flesh started peeling off, like the peel of a banana, leaving white bones sticking out at strange angles and the red muscle showing only. The eyes of these once normal people would turn red, filled. Is this dude seriously ripping off 28 Days Later? Is that what's going on here? This guy's ripping off 28 Days Later, isn't he? The eyes of these once normal people would turn red, filling with blood and hiding the irises and pupils. These people still have their intelligence, but lost senses of what was right and wrong. They would kill others, not infecting, but killing them in the goriest, inhuman ways possible. The only way to become them was to have their poisonous blood seep into your body. 28 days later. Seep into your body, making parts of your mind diminish until the part that made you was gone. The scientists that came to me, I had no idea how they found me. My mother had just died from one of these red fiends, leaving me alone in the world, detached from this murder-ridden society. I will not say how she died because it will surely give you nightmares for the rest of your life. I agreed to help try to save humanity and gain vengeance for my sweet mother's death. I was able to see where the creatures would strike, to save lives before they were lost. I would prevent casualties before they happened, and the scientists provided me with a home and this sense of good. I was finally helping others, but it was no use. The head scientist got infected and, out of fear of dying, did not report this. He infected others in the complex, and this is where I am today, locked in my room and hearing screams and grunts from the other rooms. I'm probably the only survivor left. It's strange the internet's still working here. But here is the story of how humanity failed to save humanity from itself. Goodbye. Oh, that was another good one, wasn't it? Please, guys, please submit good stories to me. Please. I beg of you. It's okay, Haley. If you're tired, go to sleep. I love you. I am good, Dustin. Thanks for stopping by. I am having this horrible luck finding a good story tonight. I've been reading what appears to be utter crap for the most of the night, but it's okay because it's still entertaining. Yeah, on a roll, number 3. This one is called The Magician. It is written by someone called K-M1N. Good night, Haley, if you're going to bed. Good night, and I love you, Haley. The magician strides onto the stage, tall and elegant, wearing a bowler cap and a black blazer to match his pants and suspenders. He smiles, an empty smile, one that has been repeated every day for a different batch of little whiny brats. The magician raises his hand, and the children continue yammering away. The twerps didn't even notice him. He hated going in after the clowns, but this time, something is different. One child, a little girl wearing a dark dress, stares intently at the magician. Realizing he actually had an audience for once, he leapt into action. First, he pulled a rabbit out of his little bowler cap. The other children didn't notice a thing, but of course, the one child smiled faintly. Smiling back, the magician grew confident and was actually enjoying his job for once. Pulled flowers out of thin air, made cards fly from one hand to the other, dancing handkerchiefs. No one else noticed him but that darling little girl. She was smiling widely now and clapped and giggled after every trick. Then his act was over, and the tigers were dragged out. Of course, that's when the children all looked at the stage in excitement. The magician looked to the crowd, trying to get one last glimpse at his only fan, but her attention had turned to the tigers. The magician had been forgotten. Saddened, the magician left the tent and trudged over to his trailer. After he closed the door behind him, he turned on his lamp. The girl was in his trailer. "Hello, mister," she said sweetly. Hello. How'd you get in my trailer?" She shrugged. "Well, anyways, what can I do for you?" She looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Are you a real magician?" He winked. "Best there is, missy." "Make me pretty." The magician was taken aback. She was a fairly pretty little girl already. "Excuse me?" "Make me pretty," she said with a bit of force this time. The magician looked at her. "Missy, you're already the most darling little girl I've ever seen." That's when he noticed things. He that's that's when he noticed things he hadn't noticed before. The difference between the skin tones, between her face and hands, the way her eyes looked sunken in, like she was wearing a mask. "Make me pretty!" she screamed. This time the magician saw that she had no tongue and sharp teeth. The magician was terrified. He walked back and tripped over a wand and landed on his rear. "Please, stay back!" She was stepping towards him menacingly, baring her sharp fangs. "Make me pretty." Then the mask slid off. It fell with a splat on the floor, and the magician saw it was real human skin. He was too scared to look at the creature's real face, so he stared in horror at the mask. "Make me pretty." The voice was less cutesy now. It was raspy and evil. I can't." He glanced up and saw the thing's horrible face. It was wrinkled and pink, with those sharp teeth, small black eyes, and without a nose. He couldn't move as the creature lunged towards him. The magician strides onto the stage, tall and twitchy, wearing his usual outfit, only this time it was stained horribly with something. The magician looked at the yapping children with black eyes and readjusted his mask. His stomach growled as he looked at the children. He hadn't eaten all day. He'd been too busy trying to look pretty. That one was okay. That one was all right. It was much better than the last like three or something it was that I read. Do you still think I'm pretty? Okay. All right. So let's just chat for a moment. So what's up, everybody? Who's all here? Who's hanging out with us, huh? If you haven't liked, please like, please share, and please subscribe to my channel if you enjoy the content. Thank you. Making me look pretty. Oh, Haley, are you sleep talking again? Yeah, that was a pretty good story. I didn't mind that one at all. I'm just pulling out some random stories, you know what I mean? Like this one. I'm going to read this one next. It's called Room 210. But I'm going to chill and talk for just a moment before we do this. What the hell is kind of author's name is that? Well, I'll figure it out in a minute. I feel pretty, oh so pretty. You guys don't want me to start singing. Everybody will go to sleep gently and calmly if I start singing. Either that or you'll all just start fapping. Which, whatever. I mean, I ain't here to judge you. If you want to fap, I don't care. All right, man. Crow karaoke, huh? One day I will sing for you guys, I promise. Actually, a lot of you have already heard me sing, honestly. Well, no, Jack, I knew you were fapping. You were fapping before you even got in here. I knew that. That's just to be expected. I honestly, Jack, if you were not fapping, I would be worried about you. I honestly would be worried about you. Yeah, who has a croner? You and Devil Jack are competing on who can fap the most. I don't know, Haley. Devil Jack is like a professional fapper. You know what I mean? Like professional. Like he has Olympic gold medals for fapping. He showed me. And you guys don't realize this, but I've been fapping this whole time. No, I'm not singing right now. But a lot of you have heard me sing already. I know Jack has heard me sing. I know for a fact Haley has heard me sing. Four Warnings has heard me sing, but she's dealing with a bloody nose at the moment. I think the Whore Hive has heard me sing. Yeah, without even skipping a beat or a word. All right, so I'm going to start reading again. This one is called Room 210. Room 210 by Joegly Author. It's Joeegly Author. Of places that you would think to be haunted and creepy, hospitals and nursing homes at about 1 a.m. are the worst. Death and illness run the halls of these institutions on a daily basis. The walls become infected with it. The floors and fixtures are run down by it. Each room becomes a cell of this thing. It's going to be another good one. Each room becomes a cell of this thing and at times makes it appear living. Let me tell you a story about a particular room, one that has become known as the death room. That room is 210. Incident 1. From what we know, the real disturbances in this room began after the death of a male patient. We'll call him Jerry. Jerry was well known to the nurses because of his frequent attempts to make himself vomit. He would stick his entire hand into his throat. That's talent. And make himself gag. Oh, no, less talent if he's making himself gag. Jerry even got to the point with his illness that no one would even believe him when he said he was sick. Then, one particular day, he began complaining about having a bad headache. After repeatedly pestering the nurse, she finally told him to go and lay down and she would bring him some pain reliever. Jerry went to his room, cursing at the nurse the entire way down the hall. The nurse, after grabbing some pain reliever, made her way down the hall and entered his room. Screams were heard throughout the facility at that moment, and other nurses came running to aid. What they found was horrible. Jerry had made his way into his room, but he hadn't survived beyond that. Blood seemed to be coming out of every part of Jerry. It had pooled on the floor around him and was spreading in thin red lines to the edges of the room. A superstition in facilities of this sort that when someone dies, you open the windows and allow their souls to escape. But countless tries proved that Jerry's windows wouldn't open. Weeks after removing his body and cleaning the room, nurses still believed that Jerry was still there, and future incidents seemed to prove that something was indeed in that room. Incident 2. Mr. Rathburn was on his second round at the facility. The first time he had been a pleasant man. He had gone through treatment and had gone home with high hopes. This time he had fallen down and broken his hip. He was put in room 210. The rumors were that he wasn't going to make it this time. The first night, it was said that he could be heard screaming all throughout the building. Every time a nurse would enter his room, he would sit straight up and tell them that the demons were pulling him under. Another time, a nurse went into his room and he tried to speak, and it looked and sounded as if someone or something was trying to strangle him. You could actually see the finger marks. Still, other nurses spoke of a shadow that would sneak down the hall and go into that room, and shortly after, Mr. Rathburn would start screaming. The day, the day, the day the he passed away said was a dreadful one. He screamed and screamed until his voice was nothing but a whisper. They said that his eyes almost bulged right out of his head in fright. His last words were, "They're coming to get me." Incident 3. Mr. Collins had only moments left when they moved him into room 210. His wife was in another room close to his. She spent most of her time at his side waiting for the inevitable. This particular night, however, she had went to her room and crawled into bed to rest for a while. She had fallen to sleep to be awakened by the commotion in the hallway. A nurse ran by her room in a state of panic. Mrs. Collins poked her head out into the hallway and noticed that there Mrs. Collins poked her head out into the hallway and noticed that it was her husband's room that they were going into. She threw her robe around her and headed in that direction. One of the aides tried to caution her and keep her back, but she pushed her way through and into the room. There was her husband's dead body in the bed with eyes and mouth wide with terror. All around him on the floor was glass from the lights overhead, but not a piece was in the bed with him. His privacy curtains were shredded from ceiling to floor as if someone had tried to take a knife to them. Mrs. Collins had to be sedated that night. The memory of her husband's face haunted her until her last moments, but especially when they transferred her to room 210. Indubitably. Well, oh, she's just trying to get her nosebleed under control. She's actually told me that it's pretty common for her to get nosebleeds. Um, at this time of year, she said the air dries out and everything else in her nose will start bleeding. So I have also been worried about her when she gets nosebleeds, but she has instructed me not to worry about such things. So, you know, I don't know. I still worry, but don't tell her that. All right. Damn, Red Dead 2 is freaking 90 gigs. That's crazy. All right, this one is called The Hollow Stalker. Submission by Death Card number 7. You are alone, a scared, fearful little creature in this dank, dark forest. I can smell you. I can feel your heart beating, every single one of them. I just love to dance to the rhythm as it quickens when you hear a sound. What was that? A squirrel? A fox? Perhaps it was. Or perhaps it was me. I have watched you for a long time, you know. I was there when you were in the playground of your first day at school. I was there when you left it. I was there when you had your first kiss. All these happy memories, and yet you never gave me any in return. That really hurt me. I'm getting closer. I can hear your breath now. I can smell the sweat and the tears running down your face as you run. You know I'm there, but you don't know how. You stop. You turn and watch the area as you slowly gain your breath back. It's so cute when you're running, especially when you don't know what you are running from. You're looking right at me. Can't you see me? I always wanted you to see me. I hope tonight you finally can. You begin running again, trying to find your way out of the trees, back towards the people and the noise, all the things I hate. I prefer the silence. Why don't you? To get away from it all, to cancel it all out. There is nothing, there is not a better feeling in the world. That's what I'm coming to give you. The chance for you to know how peaceful it truly is. I'm right behind you now. You catch your foot on something, but as you fall, you cannot see it. Was it a root, a fallen branch, or was it me again? A million possibilities fly through your brain as you fall to the leaves below. You lie there, not moving. Your eyes are closed, trying to get rid of it all, to wake up from the nightmare that you're in. Why don't you open them? I'm right here. I want you to see me. I reach out and touch you. I've never been able to touch you before. Your skin is so smooth, so soft, so flawless. I run my hand down your face. Can you feel me? I can feel you. Every flake of skin, every hair, every cell. I can feel your tears. Why do you cry? Do you not like me? Do you not want to see me? You used to tell me to go away when you were younger. The boogeyman, you used to call me. I was always upset when you told me to go, but I did. I wanted you to be happy. But now it's my turn. Open your eyes. Go on, that's it. Open them up. Can you see me? I know you can. You're not breathing anymore. You hope I go away. Well, that's not happening anymore. I lean into your face. You can see my eyes, white, lifeless, hidden away beneath the curtain of blackness that is my hair. I'm smiling at you. Do you like my teeth? They are yours. All the teeth you lost when you were younger. I sharpened them for you. Do you like them now? I move to your ear and whisper what I've always wanted to say. You're not alone anymore. You close your eyes and never open them again. They find your body hung up in a tree 3 days later. Your eyes, nothing but lifeless pools of white matter. Your teeth are gone. I took them. I want to complete the set. A small river of blood, tears, has run from your eyes. And even though you're frightened, you have a smile. You're smiling because of me. Thank you. You gave me the happiness I wanted. I'm sorry I had to take it from you. That one was kind of cool. This one is called Put Yourself in My Place. It's written by Salt. Oh, Salt. Monsters have just invaded and taken my house. I'm hiding in the woods around it just to try to find a way to get them out and take it back. I'm afraid of them. I won't let them do this, though. This is my house, and no monster can keep me from it. Now I'm mad. They deserve to be scared like I was, to be as terrified as I was when I was walking back to my house from a nice walk around the area and I saw them entering. They have to pay. I will be the one who makes them pay. I see that they have turned some of the lights on and are watching TV. I find an open window and manage to get through quietly. I'm in the kitchen. I hear one of them coming, so I hide next to the door. The door opens and I see them walk into the kitchen. Seems to be a female, though. I can't be completely sure. One thing I'm sure of is that it's completely oblivious to me. While I'm walking behind it, I grab a knife and a rag. It goes over to the window and puts its hands on my counter, looking out. That filthy monster just put its hands on my counter. I'm in a rage over this, but I keep my cool. I slowly walk up behind it, being as quiet as possible, and it doesn't seem to hear me. Quickly, I cover its mouth with a rag and stab it through its back as it lets out a scream that is completely muffled by the rag. It tries to fight back, throwing its claws backwards at me and also at my hand covering its mouth, but it is helpless and slowly slumps to the floor. Put yourself in my place. Looking down at that monstrosity of a body laying on my kitchen floor, I would feel remorse, but these same monsters took the life of my daughter a few years ago. She had just left and got her own house when they came in from nowhere. She tried to talk to them, but they just killed her on sight. No, I will not pity them, nor will I give them the opportunity to do to me what they did to her. I walked into my living room where the bigger male seemed to be watching TV. I slowly, noiselessly approach from behind. Suddenly, the screen goes black and it sees me in the reflection. It jumps up and darts into the hallway. It takes me only a second to realize that it went for my shotgun. I, qui- I quickly move to the wall at the end of the hallway, waiting for it to come to that corner. I will not let it get the best of me. Put yourself in my place. Slowly hearing the footsteps of that thing coming closer, drenching yourself in sweat from the anticipation, hearing the cocking of the shotgun, the footsteps that are nearly at you, then slowly seeing the tip of the shotgun ever so slowly passing the corner. Quickly, I turn around the corner, knocking the shotgun onto the floor. In surprise, it doesn't move, which is all I need. I throw it to the floor and jump on top of it, plunging my knife into the center of its chest. I pull it back out and stab again. This is for my daughter, you monster! I must have stabbed it at least 50 times before I slowly came to my senses. Now the entire house is quiet. I slowly get up. I kick the dead bodies a few more times, then pack them into bags and bury them deep in the ground. I clean all the blood to make my house look nice. Yes, put yourself in my place now that I killed those filthy humans. Put yourself in my place as I go outside and take down the for sale sign for the fifth time this month. All right. This story is called Inside the Whisper of Leaves by N. Rudder 94. I remember it all as if it were a dreamlike days. It was a bright and sunny day at first. No, it was bright and sunny that first day, yet it was quiet, abnormally quiet, even for the densely forested area that I lived in. Nothing could be heard for miles around. Our neighbors that lived about a quarter mile away and fought often were out of town. My own parents were rarely home because of their jobs, but they fought too, which left me alone. Alone, day after day, with no one around, no one but the wind that would dance softly through the trees. That's where I heard it. I heard it first in the whisper of the leaves. It was barely discernible. I thought I had just imagined it, but it did catch my attention, and I listened more attentively. It was a curious whisper. It came from everywhere around me, but still felt like it had a source, a form of intelligence behind it. And the more I stayed still and listened, the clearer the voice became. It was alluring, friendly, and most of all comforting. It struck me as friendly, loving, so I stayed perfectly still, and I began to hope and even pray that it wouldn't stop speaking to me. Looking back now, of course, I wish I would have ran. I wish I, I wish I wouldn't have released that monster that slept everywhere and nowhere, but I didn't. I waited and I coveted those softly spoken words. Words that meant everything and were still strangely empty. Words that only conveyed emotion at first and a voice that didn't ask for anything but a listening ear. I returned day after day to my secret forest to hear my secret friend until the weekend passed. Then it began to form real words that really talked directly to me. I didn't mind. I just thought it was an imaginary friend like the ones I used to make out of my stuffed animals. It asked me my name, John. It told me I was handsome. Thank you. It told me I had a nice smile. Thank you. It asked me how old I was. 8. It asked me why I was alone. And I cried. I cried and I cried more. Then it promised. It promised to keep the tears away from me forever. It promised that I would never, ever have to be alone ever again. It promised that it would stay with me for always. It just asked for one little thing in return. Just one little thing. For love. For a friend. For an escape from the loneliness. One small thing. Then the tears stopped. I nodded, and for a brief moment I thought I saw a smile in the air. A smile like the Cheshire cat hanging in the air. It told me I was a good boy, that, and that it would be back. I should wait for it, and it would return. And I waited. I trusted it deeply. I'm not sure why I did. It all just felt right. Even after the sun went down and I fell asleep waiting. Even after I woke up and the sun came up again. Even after I noticed my clothes had turned red. Sometime during the night, it just felt so peaceful, so calm. And then I heard it whisper again. It told me good morning. Good morning. It told me to look around, and I did. I had been sleeping on top of paper. It was shiny, almost like it had been laminated, but it had all been splattered a dark red, almost a brown color. It took me a moment to notice that something was printed on each of the small papers. They were pretty, but then I realized what they were, and I panicked. I stiffened and I screamed. Each and every one was a photo of me sleeping last night. It told me no one would hurt me again. I stared at the pictures. It told me no one would leave me again. I was handsome. It told me I wasn't alone. We'd be together forever. And we smiled. Well, there goes that one. How tiny is this tiny one? All right, it's not that tiny. This one is called Fire, and it's by K. Smallwood 3. I can taste the metallic tang of blood in my mouth, feel it trickle down from the gash at my hairline. The heat is everywhere. With each breath, I inhale hot ash. My throat is dry and scalded. The air around me seems to burn my skin, biting more viciously at my open wounds and scratches. I stopped shaking a while ago. Now my hands are steady. I'm frozen in fear. I probably make easy prey, but I can't think of anything else to do now. I'm out of ideas. I see glowing eyes from deep in the shadow of the alleyway. I avoid direct eye contact and snap my eyes shut, as if not seeing could keep me safe. If I can't see them, they can't see me, I think childishly. But I clamp my eyelids together, imagining happier, more beautiful places, ignoring the cold of the wall behind me, ignoring the burning of my skin and throat, ignoring the eyes waiting for me. I keep my eyes closed and pretend I'm somewhere far away. I know that it's pointless, but maybe I can have at least a few seconds of peace before I'm brought back to the narrow, grimy alley by a low rumble and a rush of heated air. I nearly jump, but I catch myself. I don't want to give it the satisfaction of knowing I'm afraid, though I can probably sense it. It sounds very close. I don't open my eyes. Look at me, please, it purred, its tone sickeningly polite. It's no fun if I can't see the light leave your lovely eyes. Its scorching hand secures itself under my chin as it softly strokes my cheek with its thumb, and suddenly, instead of being fanned with the flame, I'm ignited. The direct contact makes the heat seep down through every nerve in my body, making me shake with the pain. I feel like I'm burning alive. I want to cry out, but I keep my lips clenched tightly. When I try to pull away, it tightens its grip, surely leaving a bruise along with my new burns. My eyelids drift open unwillingly to find its face just inches from my own. Its horrible features twisted into a malevolent smirk. I don't flinch. I merely stand there in silence and wait. Keep whatever pride and courage I have left. The burning continues, but I keep quiet, my body alive with pain. Its unnaturally empty black eyes held mine for what seemed like hours before its mouth widened into a sadistic grin and its hand traveled down to my throat, flames engulfing me in its wake. Bum, 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 bum. All right. What's this? Oh, it was just Haley. All right, guys, I think I am going to call it for the night. I hope everybody had a good time, even though there was some questionable stories tonight. They're a little odd. Um, April made it the whole stream. That's impressive. That's impressive. And yeah, so I am going to head out of here. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. I appreciate you. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. And some of you, I'm sure I'll talk to you later. So, see ya.